Lesson number 11 of Ethics, Governance and Sustainability. In this lesson on corporate governance forums, we are going to deal with various corporate governance forums across the globe, including ICSI, Institute of Company Secretaries of India, National Foundation for Corporate Governance NFCG, OECD, IOD, Commonwealth Association of Corporate Governance, CSCG, International Corporate Governance Network, ICGN, ECGI, that is European Corporate Governance Institute, Conference Board of USA, Asian Corporate Governance Association, and finally Corporate Secretaries International Association. So this particular lesson, the scope is very limited. It is with respect to the kind of role which each of these corporate governance forums play. Majority of it are similar to each other. However, let us quickly glance through each of the forum. So it's not suggestible or advisable for the student to have a detailed discussion on each of these forums. It is better if you are sticking to the summary of the recommendations or the various concepts identified by each of these forums. So we have made beautiful mind maps for each of these forums, so which would help you remember various initiatives or various provisions with respect to the respective corporate governance forums. Let us start off with the ICSI. Institute of Company Secretaries of India. There are various provisions, corporate governance initiatives taken up by ICSI. Now, before that, firstly, let us look into the vision and mission statement of ICSI. The ICSI vision statement specifies that it its vision is to be a global leader in promoting good corporate governance, and it will achieve it through its mission of developing high caliber professionals who will facilitate good corporate governance. So the vision and mission itself is very clear that ICSI is working towards promoting good corporate governance in the corporate sector in India. And the initiatives of ICSI include setting up of Center for Corporate Governance and Research, Corporate Governance Research and Training in Navi Mumbai, and having a national award for excellence in corporate governance by ICSI. In the course curriculum for the students also, they've included this particular topic on ethics, corporate governance and sustainability. Post membership qualification course on corporate governance is one more initiative by ICSI. Secretarial standards is one initiative by ICSI. There are various publications by ICSI in terms of corporate governance. ICSI has also has devised several programs in terms of capacity building for directors, and finally and one of the things is also investor education and awareness. So these are various initiatives taken by ICSI in terms of promoting corporate governance. On similar lines, we will be looking into various other corporate governance forums as well in our coming slides. Now, NFCG, that is National Foundation for Corporate Governance. So NFCG has been constituted by the MCA. So this foundation has been basically set up by the Ministry of Corporate Affairs along with CAI, that is the Confederation of Indian Industry, ICSI, Institute of Chartered Accountants of India, and later even Institute of Cost Accountants of India and National Stock Exchange of India Limited have also become members of this NFCG. Right. So what are the vision and mission statement of NFCG? So vision statement of NFCG is that it wants to be a catalyst in making India the best in corporate governance practices. And how does it achieve it? Through creating framework for best corporate governance practices and also creating structures for ensuring and compliance with corporate governance. So through which it is going to achieve its vision of being a catalyst in making India the best in corporate governance practices. Along with it, various initiatives or various recommendations or various activities of NFCG include providing training programs for directors, setting up of National Center for Corporate Governance, and one important thing we need to remember under NFCG is with respect to its internal governance structure. So NFCG has three various governing bodies, which are number one, the governing council, number two, the board of trustees, number three, the executive directorate. In order to compare it with a normal company, so the governing council is like the shareholders, board of trustees is like the board of directors, executive directorate is like the management. So in NFCG, under the internal governance, the governance council is given the responsibility of policy making, and hence it is chaired by the minister in charge of the Ministry of Corporate Affairs. So this is the primary body which deals with policy making. Second, the board of trustees. So the board of trustees the role is to implement the policies made by the governing council and also to lay down procedures for such implementation. So they will oversee the implementation and they will basically lay down the procedures for implementation of such policies made by the governing council. So board of trustees is more or less like a board of directors of a company, and then the executive and the board of trustees, it is chaired by the secretary of Ministry of Corporate Affairs, Government of India. And then the executive directorate is like the management, right? So executive director, who is the executive director? The CEO of NFCG is the executive director. And what is the role of executive directorate? Is it is to complete the implementation of whatever be the decisions taken by the board of trustees. So the executive directorate takes care of the implementation of decisions taken care by the board of trustees. Board of trustees ensure that they lay down procedures for implementation of the policies made by the governing council. So this is how the internal governance structure of NFCG works, right? So this is about the NFCG. Now OECD is the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development. OECD is also like the OECD principles are also referred to as G20 principles for the reason that they are comprising of 19 independent countries including USA and Canada and other European countries and the European Union, which comprise like almost 80% of the gross domestic product of the global gross domestic product. 80% of it is what is constituted by these G20 countries, and these G20 countries have adopted the principles of corporate governance which have been given by the OECD. So OECD or principles or the G20 principles means one and the same. So what are these OECD or the G20 principles? Firstly, it recommended for having an effective corporate governance framework. So framework means having a proper structure, standards, policies in place for implementation of corporate governance principles. Equitable treatment of shareholders. This we have seen under rights of shareholders, the OECD principle, two OECD principles, one rights of shareholders and other equitable treatment that comes under this principle. So equitable treatment is in terms of treating shareholders on an equal basis, and those shareholders who belong to a same series of a single class shall be treated equally is what is this equitable treatment about. So the role of institutional investors or other intermediaries, including the stock markets, right? How far are they responsible, right? They also need to ensure that the companies are complying with corporate governance principles. The stakeholders shall be given the importance, they need to be identified, and proper stakeholder engagement shall be in place. Adequate and timely disclosure shall be made in order to ensure proper transparency in the of the company. And the board's responsibilities, as we have seen in many of the previous topics, the responsibilities of the board, including framing of various policies, risk management, adequate internal control mechanisms, all of this shall be ensured by the board of directors as their responsibilities. So these are the 6 basic OECD principles identified by OECD, which are also referred to as G20 principles. The IOD, the Institute of Directors UK, as the name suggests, it is pertaining to the directors per se. There are 4 things which have been identified here. Firstly, the Institute of Directors recommends that the directors shall be provided with high levels of skill and knowledge, for which it shall provide various programs, or it will design or formulate, it will devise various programs or various training initiatives through which the skill and knowledge of directors are enhanced. IOD shall provide for study, research and development of corporate governance. So it is like a research body for for developing good corporate governance principles. Policy advocacy, by which we mean that it will also ensure that it has a rapport, or it maintains good relationship with certain regulators who will ensure that adequate corporate governance principles are in place, right? When it's making a research, it comes out with certain output, right? So whatever be the research output or the research outline, whichever has been identified by the Institute of Directors, it should be going to it will be implemented only by regulators. So Institute of Directors will maintain such policy advocacy, maintain proper relations and proper dialogue with regulators who will ensure implementation of such corporate governance principles. And finally, it will act on behalf of its members. It will represent its members' grievances before adequate forums. So these are the 4 basic things you need to remember in terms of Institute of Directors. It is the Commonwealth Association of Corporate Governance. The Commonwealth countries are those countries which have been ruled by the Britain, right? So this Commonwealth Association, who are be the members of the CACG, shall comply, or shall ensure that they are in compliance with the 15 guidelines or the principles given by CACG. And again, these are just guidelines. So the countries should ensure that they are like at least complying with majority of these guidelines. So what are these guidelines, the 15 guidelines? Firstly, the leadership of the board. So it emphasizes that the board of directors shall take the role of a leader. So they should lead the company from the front. They should take the responsibility of having the strategies, everything in place. Secondly, the board composition should ensure that there is a mix of directors, proficient directors. Thirdly, the strategy, the business strategy should be something which is formulated by the board. Not just the business strategy, but also other governance practices and principles shall be formulated by the board. The board shall monitor and evaluate the implementation of its policies. The board shall ensure that the company is complying with various rules and regulations and legislations applicable for the company. The board shall ensure that it is communicating adequately with the stakeholders or the shareholders or other investors on a timely basis. Board shall ensure that it is accountable to its shareholders. Board shall ensure that it is identifying its internal and external stakeholders and maintaining proper dialogue or communication with the stakeholders, and also having proper and forming alliances with the stakeholders, making them part of the decision making mechanism, which is nothing but stakeholder engagement. No, it shall be ensured that there is balance of power. No one director can exercise ultimate or veto kind of a power, right? There shall be balance of powers among the directors. Board should ensure that adequate internal control systems are in place in the company. Board should ensure that the board per se and also individual directors are evaluated on a timely basis. Board should make sure that the CEO, the appointment of CEO and senior management is within its scope. Board should also make sure that the company is using adequate technology in systems. The risk management shall be the responsibility of the board, and finally board should make sure that the company is running on a going concern basis. So these are the 15 principles identified by Commonwealth Association of Corporate Governance. Now the International Corporate Governance Network, ICGN, so it has come up with three major areas, three major recommendations. Firstly, I mean, not recommendations per se, but three major characteristics of this ICGN are that firstly, it is an investor-led network. Now, it wanted to like provide for an investor-led network wherein various investors across the globe will provide their information, inputs, their difficulties they face, their grievances, and based on that, ICGN will come with certain recommendations and solutions. Second, it will examine the existing corporate governance principles and practices existing across the globe, because it's an international network, corporate governance network, right? So whatever be the, who are be the members, they, when we call it as a net, when do we call it as a network? Just like a social networking, even it is a network. So the network is that where there are more than a couple or there are multiple number of organizations, people, persons who are sharing certain information. And depending on such information, ICGN will examine the corporate governance principles and practices existing in place and then propose various other provisions. Right. Next, it will encourage adherence to corporate governance standards and guidelines. And finally, it promotes good corporate governance in all the organizations. So this again, this is like a very general role of any corporate governance forum, and similarly, ICGN plays the same role. But one important point is in terms of investor-led network. So since it is a network of people, so it is ensuring that it is promoting investor-led network whereby investors can put forward the grievances, and there can also put forward the recommendations for better corporate governance principles, which it will examine and then recommend for various organizations, right? Since it is an international body. The European Corporate Governance Institute, as the name suggests, it is for the European Union. So this ECGI provides and ensures that there is a research on corporate governance going on a continuous basis, depending on the inputs taken from the existing practices in the European countries. They formulate corporate governance policies which are recommendatory and which can be adopted by the companies in the European Union. And finally, it works on academics, academics, it ensures academics working on corporate governance, right? So academic working on corporate governance, we mean like academically, how can it promote corporate governance through various curriculums for various students and various professionals, right? So this is the role of ECGI, which is firstly to conduct research on corporate governance, formulate corporate governance policies, and academic workings on corporate governance. So this is the basic role of ECGI. Conference board, it is established in the USA, with which conducts research, which convenes various conferences. So firstly, it, like it just like the European corporate governance thing, even this conducts research on corporate governance, they taking inputs from the existing corporate governance principles in the USA. It convenes various conferences to promote the significance of corporate governance. It promotes the significance also of the compliance of various laws, regulations which are applicable to the entities. And finally, it provides for governance education for the directors, right? It provides for various training programs for the directors, wherein it imparts governance education for such directors. So these four are the basic traits, or I mean basic we can call it as the basic characteristics of the conference board. It's not basically characteristics, but also the role. The basic role played by the conference board are these four. It is conducting of research on corporate governance based on the existing inputs in terms of corporate governance provisions existing in the USA, convening various conferences to communicate the significance of corporate governance, and third, encouraging compliance of various laws, rules, and legislations and regulations, and fourth, providing for governance education for the directors. The Asian Corporate Governance Association, as the name suggests, it is for the Asian territory. It is incorporated in the Hong Kong, and it is also headquartered in the Hong Kong. So it is basically providing for corporate governance provisions for the Asian countries, wherein again similar to the previous two, it also provides for research on corporate governance, policy advocacy, as discussed earlier. It means to have good relationships with various regulators, including financial regulators and other parliamentarians of various countries, so that they can put forward various recommendations in terms of corporate governance implementations in the Asian countries. And finally, to impart education, not just for directors, but also for various professionals in the territory of Asia. So these are the three roles played by ACGA. Number one, research on corporate governance. Number two, policy advocacy. Number three, imparting of education. And finally, Corporate Secretaries International Association. So what is this Corporate Secretary International Association? It is an international federation, like it's an international group of governance professionals and corporate secretaries. So even a company secretary is also a governance professional. So company secretaries, corporate secretaries, or governance professionals, whatever be the name you call them. So the group of such company secretaries or corporate secretaries or governance professionals on an international basis, like internationally across the globe, they all have formed an association, which is Corporate Secretaries International Association. And such CSIA has come up with 20 practical steps to better corporate governance. So they have come up with a statement of 20 practical steps for a get better corporate governance. So we are not going to deal with all the 20 corporate steps here, but we will summarize. Now we have made an attempt to summarize this 20 corporate governance practical steps to corporate governance in the following manner. Firstly, it emphasizes the role of a chairman as a leader. The chairman should ensure that he is unbiased, and he shall play the crucial role of a leader of the board of directors. It secondly emphasizes the role of non-executive directors on the board. So their inputs as independent eyes on the board, like they're expected to be unbiased in terms of decision making. Next, access of information by the directors. So it emphasizes that the director shall be provided with access of information in terms of whatever be the provision, whichever they require. Like, whenever they are taking any decision, before they take a decision, they shall be provided with adequate information. So that is very important. Next, risk management shall be the responsibility of the board of directors. They shall ensure that there is a proper risk management plan in place. The director shall be remunerated, or the remuneration of director shall be on certain criteria which shall be decided prior by the directors themselves, and it shall match the industry standards as well. And just as discussed, they should also ensure there is proper advocacy of corporate governance. The ethical behavior of the board shall be encouraged. So the board should encourage that the company is acting ethically in whatever be the activities it is ensuring. And finally, the role of corporate secretary or a company secretary shall be enhanced in every corporate, so that he will ensure compliance of laws. He will ensure that the corporate governance is strictly adhered to by a company, thereby promoting good corporate governance across the globe. So these are the way, like, crux or the summary of the practical steps and implement or suggested by the CSIA. Right, so with this, we have finished all the forums, corporate governance forums, in terms of the major recommendations of the major role played by each of such corporate governance forum. In this lesson, I suggest the students not to go beyond and do a detailed research on each of the forums. Whatever has been discussed on each of the slides is adequate information for that respective forum. So remember the role of each of the forum and connect yourself with the basic corporate governance principles, right? So that gives you more insight on this particular topic. Hope this particular summary of all these forums help you out in your examination. Thank you.